We've reached that time, a few days after Christmas, a few days before the new year, where the buy now, pay later mentality, well, it's weighing a little heavy. How many of you are hoping Reverend Billy stops by your home to perform a credit card exorcism? Has this addiction gotten out of control? Dr. Robert Manning is the author of Credit Card Nation. He joins us from Staatsburg, New York. And Mr. Manning, let's talk about credit cards. It seems to me they're the true winners here. I'm thinking back to my first week in college, and among the tables set up of people trying to get me to sign up for the crew team and the drama club, there were credit card companies trying to lure myself and my fellow 18-year-olds in. How is this so prevalent here?
Well, the critical issue, of course, is in American society that particularly in this era of globalization, that we have a decline in real income in America. We've had an expectation now that credit isn't an earned privilege, but rather it's an entitlement of American society, and that people are entitled to spend earlier before they actually have their first job and have graduated from college than traditionally when you've actually graduated, had a salary, and can pay your bills. So what we've learned now is banks have learned to expand into markets that could not in the past have been able to pay their bills. Before it was the bank of mom and dad, now it's Chase and Citibank that's enabling young adults before they have their first job to learn how to become indolent consumers.
I think that's such an important point. I mean, 60 years ago, 40 years ago, owning 50 pairs of shoes or 5 or 7 winter coats, that would have been unthinkable, even for some of the most affluent folks. Now, almost everyone you know has overflowing closets and too many things. Do you think that this has just become the norm?
Well, I mean, it was the norm because given the fact that American society was basically the core of the global economy and that the global economy had to figure out ways to get Americans to buy more so they could keep people employed throughout the world, the norm of what was acceptable and responsible consumption was fundamentally changed over the last 20 years through probably the most successful global marketing campaign in world history.
I think that's a really important point when you bring up sort of our globalized society. There is a connection between these cheap goods made in China and Bangladesh, the consumer culture here in the United States, and also I want to bring this, make it bigger a little bit. Some of these big banks, the last 2 years, they have made record profits, while the average American is drowning in debt. I know you've written about this. Connect all the dots here.
Well, the critical issue here is that the biggest profit driver in the U.S. economy and the world is Wall Street. And as Wall Street went into more complex and sophisticated and what we would say creative financial engineering to figure out how to make more profits, when eventually the ability of Americans to service their debt was no longer possible, it's like a rubber band that snapped, and the federal government had to come in and essentially pay the bills during this period of time when there was a disconnect between the ability of consumers to pay their bills like mortgages or credit card bills and the ability of banks to continue to inject money into the economy. The big problem is that 60% of American liquidity, or the money that Americans borrowed through 2006, came from around the world. And once that credit spigot dried up, then the American banks no longer could turn to someone else besides the American government to provide credit to the American consumer.
And just real quick, I mean, it's so interesting, and I like this term, creative financial engineering. But when we look back several hundred years, when we look at some of the principles this country was founded upon, arguably, so many Americans are Christian. And I thought a good Christian was supposed to be humble. Do you think that idea has, fallen by the wayside?
Well, again, it says a lot about American culture and society, about having respect and a sense of responsibility in terms of being the steward of your household financial resources. In the case of the United States, the national steward of global resources, what is appropriate ways of spending.